good evening, everyone. This is TransParents. We are, actually, I don't know what episode this is, like 26, 27 now, I think. I don't know. This is my co-host, Jenny. And then this is our special host down at the bottom is Dennis Baker. And we will go more into his introduction in just a second. I wanted to throw this up here. Tonight, we're going to be talking about human rights, bodily autonomy, and really just different things with the LGBT community that Dennis has spoken out about, that he has lots of different experiences from a lot of different experiences that he's had from different jobs, whether it be FBI, whether it be a former police officer, and now running for as a Democratic candidate in Oklahoma in the 1st Congressional District. So thank you. We do greatly appreciate you coming on, Dennis.
Thank you.
And yeah, Jenny, like, is there anything? How about you tell us how you met Dennis? Because honestly, Dennis, like Jenny's the one that came on and said, "Hey, we've got Dennis. You need to bring on Dennis."
So let me start with hi. My name is Jenny, and my pronouns are she, her. I am the co-host of the TransParents podcast with Amber, and I'm coming to you live right now from Oklahoma, where Dennis is also at, although we're in different parts of, close, but, like 30 minutes away, probably. Anyway, I met Dennis back at the end of May. And we met at our local Pride Fest. I am on the board of Advocate Alliance of Broken Arrow, and we really seek to create a safe and inclusive space for the LGBTQ plus community in our very, very conservative little pocket right outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's a little more purple in Tulsa. It's very, very red here. And so we didn't have anything like that. And so Advocate Alliance started that. This was our second Broken Arrow Pride Fest, and Dennis came out, and I got to meet him and his lovely wife, Wanda. She's so precious. And, I just took the time to meet with him, talk with him about my concerns as a parent of a transgender individual and, kind of the direction our state has, not really the direction it's taken, the direction it has maintained recently. And, my concerns for that, and wanted to talk to him about, he said, "Hey, I'm running for 1st Congressional District." And he began to tell me about himself and his policies, and immediately just knew that I wanted to be involved, and that I that he was a great guy. Looked into him some more, and then actually spoke at one of his campaign fundraisers, nice little event, and got to kind of tell my story as far as, being the parent of a transgender individual and kind of dispelling some myths, breaking down some stuff like that. And so that's how I met Dennis.
That's awesome. And yeah, like Dennis, from my understanding, this is your first run, right? The first time you're running?
Yeah, so this is the first time I've run for Congress here in the 1st Congressional District. Actually, this campaign's I've been like at this for about a year and a half.
Right.
You can never start too soon. So this campaign we're on like the last stretch of this, putting every effort we can into this. So it's been a long haul, but we are nearing the final part of this.
Yeah, I was looking at, I had gone over well, first of all, like, because we have tribes here, I was like having to go and look up, I had pulled your background up today. I was like my stepdad does a little bit of phonetics. And so I was like, make sure I'm saying these right, because I do not want to like embarrass myself or, insult someone. And so my stepdad, because Muskogee, we have Muskogee here, or that is one of the local tribes from where I was back home, from where I'm from the area that I was from. There's several tribes back there, but that's one of them. And so I was like confusing the sound of it, and my stepdad's like practicing the O sound with me today. And I was like, oh yeah, oops. She's like, Amber, you're thinking of back home. I was like, oops. So that's like, I find that very interesting that you have that heritage. You're there in Oklahoma. Well, with Jenny and I, like being in a red district, being in a red state, like that's scary enough. And I can imagine that you see a lot of the intersections of where all these things kind of meet, like whether it be crime, whether it be upholding civil rights, whether it be, bodily autonomy, like all of these things, healthcare access. They're all issues that I feel like everybody has, but unfortunately, I feel like our more marginalized communities suffer greater.
Right. It's interesting in Oklahoma because, we had tribal removal back in the 1830s, and a a lot of tribes were removed. Oklahoma, the Muskogee tribe, I'm a member of that tribe. Our tribe was removed. That's how my ancestors got here. But I didn't know until high school that I really wasn't of a Muskogee tribal descent. I was of Yuchi. So Yuchi is a separate tribe. It's a separate language. They were part of a confederacy with the Muskogee tribe and were removed. And so we're like a tribe within a tribe, and we're in danger right now of losing our native language. We depend, on the Muskogee Nation funding, but we don't have separate funding. We're trying to keep, a lot of that alive. As you know, I was in the FBI. I was assigned to North Carolina for about 10 years. And I know the Lumbee tribe is out there. There's tribes that have tried to get federal recognition, and I understand that and those fights for recognition. And
I think Lumbee is the only one left here in North Carolina. Like, they've been fighting for a really long time. My understanding of that is there's an argument of like where their lineage comes from. And if they're, I guess, like different lineages that have kind of been mixed, or whether they actually have their own lineage.
It's crazy because, it started with, the white definition of an Indian by blood quantum. But traditionally tribes, they've defined their own membership in their tribes. And it wasn't by blood quantum. It was where they bring a lot of people into their tribes. And so, but over the years, it's now been kind of that, and it's almost kind of racial. And it's a big mess. Not something we want to sort out here, but it's a history, a long history. The main thing that we have going on here, and I'm sure it's the same thing with trans rights. We have a fight here for sovereign rights. We have rights that were granted through the through a Supreme Court decision, a McGirt decision that said this area here in Tulsa, there's like a couple of big tribes here. One's the Muskogee tribe, the other is the Cherokee, and Tulsa's right smack dab in the center of this. So it's the biggest city on a tribal reservation. And we have the city of Tulsa filing lawsuits to whittle back sovereignty. We have the state of Oklahoma filing lawsuits. And so the reason I'm even saying that is because when it comes to the trans community, when it comes to individual rights, equal protection under the laws, your community is fighting the same fight. Constitutionally, you have those rights, but you have individual groups, you have governors, you have legislatures like in Oklahoma, which is ground zero, fighting against trans rights, that are trying to whittle those rights away when they are constitutionally guaranteed. And one of the things that, and they're kind of linked, when you talk about, the Women's Health Care Act, for example, which I would love to see get passed. Republicans voted it down. Codify Roe v. Wade. Let women make their own medical decisions. Let parents expand it. Parents make their medical decisions, for their kids in consultation with their doctors. It's a right everybody else has. Why are we taking that away from certain members of the community and making them have lesser rights? So it's a right that is worth fighting for, and we're in the right. And it's just basically, this is what America is about: equal rights, equal protection under the law. So if you're sitting there feeling outraged, you should be. You should be that they're doing something that is un-American.
I agree. And I looked at the Women's Reproductive Health Protection Act, like some of that information that was out there on your website. That is something that it's one of my main initiatives, is to eventually codify bodily autonomy, and not just for women's reproductive rights. I think if we actually I hate to say it, but almost if we scrub the Roe v. Wade out of it and we just went for codifying bodily autonomy at the federal level, that would protect like all of these marginalized communities. You'd protect the trans community, anybody in LGBT community, whatever services they were looking for, the indigenous, Black and brown communities, like everybody would kind of be protected to make that choice for themselves. And if not, if they are a minor, with the parents, because healthcare is kind of like my reigning corner, and healthcare for me we should never have politicians and pastors do not belong in a patient's room. That's between their doctor and themselves and their families. And that's it. Like nobody else should be butting into that. That is a personal decision that I don't feel like we should be kind of wading into. And your legislature is set up very similar to North Carolina. We have 2 red supermajorities. So Cooper tries to do what he can, but they have veto proof. So if they bring it back, they are probably just about guaranteed to get it in unless they try and pass it on a day where a lot of people are absent. It's going to pass here. So we are constantly, our governor, typically, they are usually opposite of whoever's in control. And I guess that's to keep one from getting ahead of the other. But I am really hoping that we kind of begin to move more into a more balanced. I don't feel like that's going to happen in the next cycle statewise. We mentioned it before we went on air, and we talked about it here that there's quite a few very conservatives, red conservatives running in North Carolina. But as far as if you codify that at the federal level, then I think we also kind of said, you know what, now states can't go in and create these anti-trans laws. They can't create these, pro or anti-abortion laws that restrict care that aren't just, it's more than just a human right. You're now creating harms because not giving children the access to gender affirming care that they need is causing not only physical but mental harm. And Jenni and I, we talk about this a lot, the mental health impacts of that. And we know that this section of youth are the highest for the homelessness, for honestly, for the runaway population, for drug addiction, for alcohol addiction, for mental health problems, suicidal ideation. Like we know that they are the most at risk. And yet we're creating these laws that say they protect children, but really they're creating more harm. And that was what I had initially planned to do when I got out of school, was become a health advocate and work. Honestly, I wanted to work in subcommittees to help influence healthcare reform. But I realized with the red supermajorities, and my son had just come out, that it was not the right time because I knew that they would paint a target on his back in the county I'm in.
Right.
He's now changed. He is, my son is 26, and so he's older than Jenni's son. But he has just gotten like his documentation all changed. We are now working on surgery stuff, but we made the official name change. And now I'm not nearly as worried about speaking out because it's completely like even the last name's changed. So they're not going to find him. And I feel like I can speak out about it, but I think it's horrible that I don't even feel like I'm safe to speak about something that I need to speak about in my own state because of how it will impact my kid. But my kid comes first. That's kind of why I told Jenni when we met that I was really kind of mum on my story. And then after like a little bit, my son, I was talking about trans rights, but I wasn't talking about my experience as a mom. And my son finally was like, I'm out to like all of my friends. I don't care. Like, don't tell them my information, but if it's yours, do what you want. So, Jenni and I, we kind of started talking about it more. And then honestly, knowing that this election cycle was going to be really important, seeing the slate of anti-trans legislation that went through last year, we kind of in November were like, okay, we got a year. If we're going to get out there and start trying to have a conversation about it and make any kind of a difference, we need to do it. So all of your work in it, I love the fact that you speak out about it.
So Jenni, I'm sure you feel the same way. There are some rights that everyone should have, not just people living in certain states. And so the right to privacy, which is the right that the Supreme Court previously found in the Constitution that allowed, Roe v. Wade to go forward, they took that right away. And so my campaign is about giving that right back. And I think that would cover, the medical care for trans kids that is nobody's business. You have the right to privacy. You have the right for the government not to interfere in that. And Jenni, I'm sure you feel the same way. And that's your biggest fear is that you and your child make the best medical decisions. You're in the best position to know what that is, not the governor, not the state legislature. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, so when I hear like talking about, well, just allowing parents, and their kids to make those decisions together, I know that coming from a very, very conservative family, I understand where they're coming from. I get it because it was so ingrained in me that it's still, I can still carry that with me enough to go, oh, this is where they're coming from. And I know where to, I know where to position myself on that. As a much more obviously left person, I have also seen where parents want to make medical decisions for their children, including we're not going to get them treatment for their diabetes. We're going to pray about it. And that is very terrifying. So, I have big opinions about that. That is abuse, that's harm, that's tantamount to medical abuse. So if I feel that strongly about that, I can see where they may have those same feelings. Like that might be their point. See how strongly you feel about that, Jenni? That's hurting that child. That's how we feel about it. And I get it. And a big part of what Amber and I really want to accomplish, and we've had some great guests on, like Dr. Diana Sorensen, some neuroendocrinologists, neurobiology, we want to back it with science. We want to back it with evidence. We want to back it with really dispelling the myths of things like, I have a friend who has an 8-year-old that is gender questioning. And there is this idea that everybody just takes their little 8-year-old to the clinic and throws them on, hormones and starts planning surgeries. And that's just not what happens. What happens is you allow social transition. You want to cut your hair different. You want to wear different clothes, try on a different name, try on a different pronoun. Cool. We're just going to roll with it and go and be relaxed about it. And in the event that child does grow out of it, because some do, not all, not even really most, but some do. And so allowing that kind of relaxed posture about it to say, if he grows out of it, then at least my kid knew, hey, I have your back. I'm here for you. I love you. I wasn't your first bully. I didn't do anything to cause more harm in that moment. And you're safe to tell me anything about yourself. Yeah. That's all that we're asking for, is that people are more educated about it and know that we do work very closely. My son was in therapy for 2 years before he even, we even talked about things like hormones. We didn't even allow my son to get on hormones until he was 18 years old. And that's not because, it wasn't medically right or, doctors. It was more about, I was concerned what his dad would do if that happened, because I still had a child under 18 living in the home. And I thought, oh no, if this makes his dad mad, because, so we did all
custody.
We were very conservative about our approach to this, and he's doing well and he's thriving. And deep down, I wish I had been able to help him with hormone blockers sooner, because there are parts of his body now that betray his identity and that cause more distress for him. Mm-hmm. So for now, he's still on things like antidepressants that also treat anxiety. Mm-hmm. So, and we'll talk about that later, like why it's okay for 14-year-olds to be on SSRIs, but not hormone blockers, but that's another conversation. So my feelings are, I really do understand where a lot of these people are coming from, but where they're coming from is a place of ignorance. They've been fed misinformation, disinformation, straight out lies. They've had that fear campaign and that hate campaign thrown at them, and they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing for children too. So I want to try to come together on that point, that we understand that you think you're doing the right thing for children. Please hear us. Please listen to more trans voices and the voices of those of us who are walking our trans children through this, because when you're knowledgeable, you don't have to be as afraid of it, and you can really start to embrace and accept your child.
Yeah, I think, and so in the case of trans children, you're working with medical professionals, you're working with counselors. Yep. You're getting them professional help. Big difference than if you have a child and you don't get them any medical help.
Right.
And so, that's why I think it's wise actually when you have this situation to allow the parent and the professionals to handle it, and not someone that is politicizing this to get elected, because basically that's what's happening. And that's what's happening in Oklahoma. So I know a lot of our laws in Oklahoma, we have a trifecta. We have a, Republican governor, our legislature, Senate and House are both Republican. They look to other states. They look to Florida, and their agenda when they have their slate is just to pass those laws without consideration for the impact they're having. And we've seen it, Jenni, here. We've seen the result of bullying and that type of attitude from above that filters down to students. And we've seen a death. And it is a matter of life and death for these kids.
And there's more death than we've seen. There was a young man here at my child's high school who she went to school with in her grade level who took his own life as a result of just constant bullying. We don't always see them. We're not seeing near what's out there. It's not making the news because there's not a recorded video of a fight that took place first. It's happening all the time. It's not being talked about. It's not getting the media coverage. It's a very personal and private thing to have a family member or an individual take their own life. That's I get it. But there's a lot more of it going on than we're aware of.
Right.
I'd agree. And I guess with your FBI experience, let me go here to this question. During your career, in combating domestic and international terrorism, I guess, what would you say are your feelings of what's important for protecting this particular community that right now is being targeted? Because we do see it, and we're not seeing it just here. We've seen it internationally. Jenni and I last week, we had an impromptu change from one topic to another, and we wound up talking about the Olympics boxer, Amin Khalif, and how people were misgendering her and putting it out everywhere. And she's from a country that this could put a very large target on her back, on her family's backs, on her community's backs. So I guess what are your thoughts on that and the impact that that's having?
Yeah, it is an international issue, but let me talk just briefly about America, about the United States, about some of the laws here, and about Oklahoma. So one of the things that we've done on the federal level is have a federal hate crime law to categorize that. So the main reason, so you will hear a lot of Republicans say, well, we already have a law against assault. We already have a law against murder, or, all those laws. Why do we need a special one? Well, the reason we need it is for tracking purposes. So when you categorize this correctly, when you get a prosecution and the FBI can track, where are we seeing this? Are we seeing patterns? Can we intervene and prevent this? And we have actual accurate data. Now, in the state of Oklahoma, we don't have a state hate crime law. So when the Tulsa Police Department shows up and someone's been assaulted, and if it's been motivated because of a person's sexual orientation, that's not noted.
Right.
And so we don't know how many hate crimes are happening. We see assaults, but we don't have a separate category. So when you see people talk about that, from a law enforcement perspective, it's vitally important if you want to prevent and deal with hate crimes and the types of hate crimes and how are they. It reveals groups, coordination. Was it one-off? Is there a pattern? Is it increasing? What can we do to prevent it? Do we need more education? It's all tied up to categorizing these crimes. And so the FBI long ago started a program where they do a uniform crime report where states participate and they categorize crimes. And there's another big push to make sure that the states comply. And I'll tell you one area where it's really bad, and we have to make sure we have legislation in place to deal with this, is that a lot of universities, when it comes to certain types of assaults and sexual assaults, don't want those reported because it looks bad for their colleges. And I'm very aware of that. It's something that I will make sure that, for the good of our students, for the good of, crime prevention, we have to have accurate stats about what's going on so we can make good decisions. The second thing is training and education. Huge in especially in Oklahoma, where they don't want that in the schools, and it's vital that it be there. And yes, it should be about trans kids, what that means, but it should also be about, a lot of children get sexually exploited because there is no education or training. It's so vital.
Yes.
And I hate to add more to a teacher's burden, but that's where it's at now. And so I say better teacher resources to help them with that, better specialists that can provide that training. It's in our children's interest and in their future to invest in that, and not hide it and think that by ignoring it, it goes away. It doesn't. It's still there. It's just we don't know about it.
Right.
And I think when you don't know about it, that's obviously harder to create some kind of shift, a correction of those events. If you're burying the facts and you're not putting that out there, because we're pretty much the same way here in North Carolina, and they don't want to report about that either. They don't want to report we don't have a hate crime for gender, the same thing. And because Jenni and I, we did a show, and a lot of times North Carolina and Oklahoma are pretty similar on these fronts. And so one of those things unfortunately, when NEX passed earlier this year, that was something at the same time we had another student that had, or not student, but we had another individual here, trans individual in North Carolina, who at first they said that it was kind of like accidental. And then the parents kind of were like, we're not letting you put that out there. And come to find out, he had been targeted by a hate crime from somebody who'd come across the border and of South Carolina to kidnap him and kill him. And it was just and he was targeted because of his gender identity. And when you create these laws, or honestly, don't allow these laws to be created, it does make it a lot harder to track. And it makes it a lot harder for those families who Jenni and I, who have trans children, if something happened to them and we wanted to report it, well, there's not going to be any way to track that unless you go to someone like a gender equality center, or like here in North Carolina, I know UNC and Duke do a lot of work with these communities. And so like it might be reported to them. But as far as that being able to go out across the state, not if our legislator has anything to do with it. They'll bury it all. Like they took over our college boards now. Like they took over the community college boards. They took over the university boards. They get to make whose decision on who gets to sit on what. And then they even created their own court that if you decide you don't like the legislation, these are 12 judges that they weren't selected by the general public like every other position in our state is. They got elected by whoever's in charge of the legislature, which is who? Republicans. So it's 12 Republican judges who, of course, are going to any Democrat who comes in and says, we have a problem with that. Of course you do. So it's really hard to create these when you don't expose it. And so I do think that is something, and I think that kind of inflames it too, does it not? Like the fact that they can go and push this misinformation, like what we've seen, the rhetoric, like being targeted. Like I actually had looked it up, and what was going on, bless her heart, with Amin over in the Olympics, a lot of it was coming from the U.S.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
The majority of that misgendering, the majority of those posts, all the news information, the people that were inflaming it was us.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like, again, this is an international sport. That's a woman from another country. That's from a country that she would be dead. Mm-hmm. And y'all aren't worried at all about and that's the bigger picture, is that we need to understand that there is a party that kind of, it's the rights for me and not for thee, and whoever, we don't care about anybody else. And then I kind of feel like the Democrats have gone, hey, everybody else, please come over here. We'll protect you. Like Statue of Liberty was written at her feet. That I thought was what that's what we stood for. I think I must be a little off.
It's Dennis, I thought something you said that was really interesting. You did talk about things like training and education. I think about our own state, local police, that they don't have probably any proper training. I don't know enough about that locally, but I know with the push, especially in red states, to eliminate things like DEIB, now you're looking at entire police forces who don't know how to interact. And we can say the truth is the truth. The police aren't really great at interacting with atypical or marginalized people as it is.
Mhm.
And I don't hate the police. They have a tough job that I couldn't do. And, you know, I think there are probably plenty of people. My husband is a former civilian officer. And I think there are plenty who do get into it for good reasons and want to do the right things and do want to help their communities. But if they don't know what to do in those circumstances, or they encounter somebody and all that they've ever known is their side's rhetoric, then they're already going into a potentially vulnerable, volatile, or especially needy situation that they can't truly help because they just don't know.
Right.
And go into a situation where a trans woman is being abused, and in your mind that's a man, you know, where there are those biases underneath us where we think that two men fighting is somehow mutual combat, but a man hitting a woman is somehow worse. And, you know, of course men shouldn't hit women, but you draw trans women into that. And if your perspective is, well, that's just two men fighting, you're not addressing the fact that this is a person in a very vulnerable situation from a vulnerable community who may need different supports, may need different helps, may need different resources in order to keep them safe.
No, I agree. Training, you know, the other thing I want to mention too is just the responsibility for our political leadership and their rhetoric and their news conferences when they call, when they sign these laws, when they speak out like they do, when you have a state superintendent that speaks out like he does, then that has consequences and it impacts people's lives. It's sending a signal to kids that that's how they're supposed to behave. And these are young minds that are being influenced in a bad way. And it does lead to people being bullied. It leads to people being injured. And it's so irresponsible. And so I can't say enough about our leadership. We have Republican leadership, and to tone it down and stop. These laws aren't necessary that they're passing. You have a trifecta. You're like, you know, we would need like so many people to be a majority. You don't need to keep pounding the drum on this, but they still do. So that's one of the reasons why, especially in Oklahoma, having a majority at the federal level in Congress is going to be so important to support Kamala when she gets elected president, to be able to enact some laws that apply to, so everybody in all 50 states have equal protection under the law, not just some. So think back to, you know, slavery. And back then, all you heard from the southern states was states' rights. You know, each state, we should be able to determine, well, you know, holding someone in slavery is so against the fundamentals of America, against actually our Constitution, that no state should be allowed. So you have the federal government coming in and passing these laws, the amendments, the 14th Amendment, you know, freeing the slaves. It's the same thing with some of these rights, Amber. They're so fundamental. They're so necessary. Every American should have them. They shouldn't have to leave your state and go to another state to get your fundamental rights, period. And trans rights are those rights. I firmly believe it.
I think when I look at a lot of, Jenni and I brought this up because we did a couple of different episodes in a row. Or one we talked about like the anti-trans policies, and the next we talked about pro-trans policies and what states were doing that, and kind of looking at the patterns that were behind that to get people to kind of question, like, what are you being fed in a way, and who are you getting that information from? But at the same time, what we really kind of notice with those is, if you have, and so 23, 24, both were regulars for anti-trans and pro policies. But this is also the high amount for any one specific ruling, right? For any community that's ever been passed in any congressional year, like now 2 years in a row that are being targeted. And like Jenni and I talk about, so we know that less than 2% of the population is trans, which means that less than 2% of every single state is trans. So if your politicians are passing all of these bills that are, you know, 25, 30 bills that are anti-trans and pro-trans, who's actually 98% of the other
Right.
in that area? And like, really, are you questioning what you politicians are doing to represent everybody's rights? They kind of focused on one thing. And I think in a way that kind of, again, gives people that lens to kind of go, step back and go, all right, wait a minute. They're attacking the economy. They're attacking Social Security. They're attacking abortion rights. They're attacking everything that has to do with bodily autonomy or trans. Why? And it just to people to, again, just think about what people are really, what their intentions are, and why they're creating these. North Carolina tried to pass, and actually did. We passed a gender bill that says that trans females cannot participate in high school, actually it's middle school, high school, and collegiate sports here in North Carolina. At the time that the case was brought forward, there were 0 trans women trying to play female sports in North Carolina. The 2 trans women that had applied to do that in North Carolina in the state had both graduated. So they created a bill based on no one in the state. And it was just kind of like, so if they spent all this time and all this rhetoric and they're coming and they're grooming your kids, where's the grooming? We didn't groom our children. So again, it's just, yeah, it's nuts. Because like Jenni, as I told Jenni, like my son didn't come out until he was like 19. Kind of questioned some things in high school. Again, I just kind of like wheels off, training wheels off, just go where you need to figure that out. I just understood from my marriage where I kind of been put in a very tight box, not to do that to my kid. I kind of, things were beginning to kind of come very clear that I knew what general direction I thought we were moving into. And then when he finally did come out, it was kind of like, okay, that's the final puzzle piece. And yep, got it, done, easy. And I think when we look at that, I didn't have to worry about the hormones. I didn't have to worry about legislators saying my kid can't get care. And it's funny because you'll have these same states that are saying state rights for parents and what they can learn in a classroom. But then with the rights to make those choices for our children in a doctor's office. And that is kind of a what? That somebody explained that one to me. And again, I think when people really, and because they don't necessarily have someone in their community that's trans, they don't necessarily know someone, or honestly, the person that's around them that doesn't feel safe enough to come out to them. I think without knowing that information, they feel okay to remain ignorant about you. And then it comes out, it's like, oh, now I know somebody, and now, I got to be on my cues. And then they really start to actually commit to learning more, to educating.
Mm-hmm.
Amber, are you with us? Sometimes she freezes. She has bad.
Okay.
Oh, she's back.
Yeah, no, we all started spinning, and I was like, oh no.
No.
Jenni, you may. Yeah,
You
okay. Yeah, it's still lining. It's still trying to figure back up. If it keeps doing it, we may end early, guys, just so that,
And then a blank screen the whole time of me spinning out, because I do that a lot on my other show late on Friday nights. But yeah, I guess, Dennis, when you look at, because I wanted to say, so there was another thing, when you look at the education and like with Walters, what he's trying to do, what do you think are ways that we can kind of protect? Because we did, like Biden, they did try and put in the Title X, like expand that to protect kids in school. And now you have states that are saying, I'm going to ignore this. We've got a couple injunctions that have been put in place. I guess, what do you think needs to be done to try and confirm that, or like to put more bust into like what to, I guess, support that, like keep it can't
So here's
thwarted.
Here's one thing that I'm firmly in support of is the U.S. Department of Education, and we know Republicans have platforms. I think the Republican platform is to abolish the Federal Department of Education. And the main reason they're doing it is because the Department of Education, when they hand out funding, they give guidelines to the schools on how they account for it, how they spend it, and where it goes. What the states want to do and what my opponent wants to do is to block grant that funding. So when you hear the term block grant, all that means is just give it to the state and let them figure out how they want to spend it. And we all know in states like Oklahoma, it's not going to go where it needs to go, where it's designated to go. And it's just, they will spend it. Probably what will happen, it will go to a private school or it'll go to a religious school. It won't go where it's intended. So one of the things that the federal government does, and they do a good job, is account for money that is given to the state and make sure that it goes where it's supposed to go. And so one of my things that I talk about a lot is when I get to Congress is to make sure that we support the Department of Education. These rules are necessary. We have a state superintendent in Oklahoma, Amber, I don't know if you've heard this, who has said, I don't want to take federal funding. We're not going to take federal funding for education because we don't like them telling us how to spend that money. And typically that money goes to support those groups that are underfunded to begin with. And he thinks that it's just not right to be spending money on disadvantaged kids or for education in issues, progressive issues, or, for some of the title, protections, the school lunch programs, all that. And so he wants to end it. I think what's going to happen in Oklahoma because Oklahomans, the vast majority of us, support public education, and we see these types of radical attacks. There's going to be some big changes. I don't think that will not continue in Oklahoma. But the problem we have right now, until he is, voted out of office, he's doing a ton of damage to our educational system. He's basically dismantling it in favor of private education.
So I'm a former public education teacher, and I spent all but 2 years. So I was at 8 years of my education experience. Pardon me, I have dogs. Working in schools that were more than 50%, students in poverty. And the first 5 years I worked in schools that were, I'm talking like 90%. And many of those children, the only meals they ate were at school through free breakfast, free lunch, and a lot of them were enrolled in the backpack program, which sent them home on the weekends with a backpack full of food. And it's, I've seen comments on different things where people will say, we've lost Amber for a minute, she'll be back. I've seen comments where people will say, well, we're diving into socialism and standing in bread lines, and, parents need to work and parents need to do this. And what I learned was that most of these families were doing the best with the tools they had. These were, poverty is complex. It's not quite as simple as you're just not working hard enough. And regardless of any of that, those children have absolutely nothing to do with it. Those kids have nothing to do with whether their parents have any money or not. And kids need to eat. And we have no hope of having an educated, healthy, productive population that does contribute to our economy if our kids aren't eating. They can't think in school when they're hungry. I don't know about you. I can't think whenever I'm hungry. I can't think when I haven't had a good night's sleep. And kids who don't have AC in the summer and who don't have heat in the winter don't sleep well. When you have food scarcity, and there are tons of situations or factors that go into what makes one family impoverished and what makes another family this. But ultimately, one of the most basic things in the whole world is we feed kids. I don't understand any kind of argument against feeding children because they're children. And maybe their parents do suck, and maybe their parents are addicts. Listen, I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I don't have any place to say anything, regarding that, but it doesn't matter. Those are kids, and you feed children. And I don't understand the argument that like somehow that there's something wrong with that. I also did work for, I don't mind saying it, Epic. I'm sure you are familiar with Epic. And I was recruited by Epic and worked there for about a year. And this was before the SHIT hit the fan with Epic. So this was several years back. And I was in special education there. And I had a student who needed something. And I went to our special education director and said, here's something my student needs. And she said, well, no, that's, we don't have the funding for that. And I said, well, per pupil funding, I know enough, dictates that a student with special needs should have more per pupil funding. This should be set back for them. Large print isn't something, I mean, he was serviced by, the Oklahoma Blindness Institute. He needs large print. And she said, well, those extra funds actually go for like the teachers' salaries. And I was like, whoa, that's illegal. And spoke with one of the, founders of Epic over there. I can't remember his name anymore. Cheney? Maybe. I might be thinking of Dick Cheney. Anyway, can't remember his name. David Cheney. And, was fired. I was let go 3 days later after bringing that up. Then, what hit the fan over at Epic, and now they are still under that. And so when you talk about wanting those funds to go to, they want them to go to these charter schools and these private schools, and they don't understand that your child, your neurotypical regular family has money kid is always going to be okay. People with money, you're always going to have access to abortion. You're always going to have access to resources and food and the schools you want to go to. But that's not a lot of our population. We are all one life incident away from homelessness, right, from financial ruin. I
agree. The vast majority of Oklahomans are living paycheck to paycheck. So one car wreck, one hospital bill, right, away from being in that circumstance.
Right.
We have 1 in 5 children in Tulsa County living in poverty.
Yeah.
1 in 5. We have the community block grant program for the National School Lunch Program, which gives, if you have a certain threshold for kids that qualify for free or reduced lunches, then the whole school gets it.
Yes.
I was told yesterday, and I haven't verified this, Jenni, maybe you've heard, but I heard that the entire Tulsa Public School District qualified for that because we have that many students in our system. And if we raised the minimum wage, for one, if we had stronger unions, if we had jobs that pay a living wage, maybe we wouldn't have to have a community block grant program and feed every child. Maybe that wouldn't be necessary, but that's the state of our economy in Oklahoma right now.
Right.
And so we are going to feed hungry kids. And I can't think of a better way to spend my tax dollars if a kid is hungry than to give them food.
Amen. Hey, I'm funding a war machine every day. Take my money, feed a child.
Feed the child. It's the future of our country. Why are we not investing in these kids? I want to say this because
they are up next to take over while we age out. My God, feed them. And please, can we stop making them, cower in their classrooms because they're afraid of being massacred? That is it's all so bizarre to me. But you brought up our wage, and I know that you are, very pro raising the wage in Oklahoma. You even started a petition for that. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So our campaign has been, we don't have it now because I think the petition drive has ended, but when that petition was going on at all our campaign events, we had that out there, and I'm a big supporter. One of the things that we don't get it in Oklahoma, and I tell people this because the role of Congress and what this job can do, if we get a majority, is pass a national raise the wage for everyone. So it's another one of those, inequality type things where California, they've raised their minimum wage. A lot of states have done it. Oklahoma will never do it for their people. As long as Republicans are in control, they don't care. They don't talk about poverty. They don't invest in education. I hear the governor state every time he makes a speech, how proud he is that he's made Oklahoma the best state in the country for business.
What?
I'm saying I want the best state in the country for people.
People.
And if you don't care about people, maybe just think about our kids. Maybe the best state for kids. Maybe the best state for families. Maybe the best state in the country to raise a family. Business is not going to prosper until the people are invested in. They're the ones that drive the business. They have it so entirely wrong. And the reason I state this, and I keep stating this, is that I have to get through to Oklahomans that, we've had a trifecta for what now? Almost 10 years, a trifecta. They've been in control of every level of government, Republicans.
Yeah.
If they were going to do something to improve this state, wouldn't they have done it by now?
10 years.
10 years.
Have dropped in rank in education.
And our rankings in every metric, healthcare access,
women incarcerated,
longevity, women's healthcare access, women living in poverty, the percentages, the poverty rate, our achievement, in schools, the dropout rate, teenage pregnancies. These are all metrics that tell us something is terribly wrong in this great state of Oklahoma when we're in the bottom of all those metrics and we're not addressing it. I don't hear them talking about it. You'll never hear my opponent talk about poverty. He doesn't care that people are living in poverty. What do we do about that? We just turn our heads. Or access to healthcare, or those categories that are so low, or the achievements in our schools, the funding. You'll never hear that, but you will hear him going and talking about raising the age to receive Social Security. So he wants to cut that.
Yeah.
But
or everybody should just be carrying a weapon wherever they go, and let's arm the teachers, and children like mine are filth. And it's just bizarre. Like, where we get all the things you hate. We understand what you hate. What do you love? Because I love that you called this the great state of Oklahoma. I have talked to people who have moved here from states like Missouri, from states like California, from states like Texas. And you know what they say? They say, man, y'all have the friendliest people here. You have the nicest people here. And regardless of political affiliation, the people here are just shirt off their back, come together as a community. My parents moved here from Texas. They live in a little neighborhood in Coweta, and my dad has that little neighborhood app. And he got on there one day. He was having he'd had his hot tub fixed, couldn't get it back up on the pad because something happened to the guy who fixed it. He just puts out a thing there. Hey, if there are some young men in the neighborhood or around here who could come help me with this, I'll pay them. 4 men showed up. My dad's never met a one of them. 4 grown men show up, take care of this for my dad, absolutely refuse any payment. My dad ended up making a donation to, I think, their church or their church's youth group. He wanted to do something. That's Oklahoma. Man, we have been through horrible disasters like the Murrah building bombing, through tornadoes, and you watch this incredible community of Okies come together and love each other and help each other. It's possible. We've got it in us to do it.
We have such great people here, and I've been fighting for this campaign. Some of the things that talking about Oklahoma values that I was raised with, just growing up in Oklahoma. And there's 3 that I keep talking about because it's just so core about who we are in Oklahoma. The first thing I talk about is that we keep our word. We keep our word. The second is we take care of each other. We take care of our neighbors. And the third is we don't quit. So these are Oklahoma values that, whether you articulate that or not, you see it every day.
Yeah.
We're being divided among ourselves, and there's a far right element that's at work in this state, but the vast majority of Oklahomans, they are still there. They'll give their word. It means something. When you need help, you have their back. We have each other's back. You just wait till the next tornado strikes, and it will, or the Sand Springs levees flood, and they will.
Yep.
Who's going to be out there? It's going to be Oklahomans helping each other. And then we don't quit. We don't give up. So we, as Democrats, And this campaign, as a Democratic campaign, I know it looks tough. It's hard. We're outnumbered. We're being outspent, but we don't quit because we have the power of knowing that what we're proposing is for a better future for Oklahomans. And it's all about, at the heart of it, the same thing, taking care of each other and taking care of Oklahomans.
I love that. I love that. How are you feeling? Pretty pumped since we've got this new candidate that's injecting a lot of excitement and passion. How is that impacting your campaign?
It was like a whole new burst of energy.
Yeah.
And so at the heart of our campaign, I hate to say this, but it's just the reality is that we have to raise money to get our voice out. And after Kamala was announced, the contributions, people wanted to get involved.
Yeah.
It went up. The people that were coming to our campaign website and registering to help out with the campaign, it more than doubled. So people wanted to get involved. When we had some of the meetings at the party level and the county meetings, more people were showing up. Went out to a meeting at Rogers County and it was packed. And I said, this is unusual, isn't it? And we had a show of hands. How many are here for the first time? And there were tons of people there for the first time because they see a change is here, a change is possible, and they want to be involved in it. They want to be part of that change. And it's not change in anger, it's change in being positive and seeing a brighter future and seeing things being better. And that's the energy, that's the joy. And when you see what's going on with Kamala, her campaign, that's how they're leading with, hey, positive energy.
Yeah. And laughter. I love it. I love it. That's the trickle down.
Right? Like that's the most that they can come at her with is laughing. It's like, it's better than being
terrible. Like my laugh is offensive. So I relate to that so much. I love it. Every time I laugh, I hear myself. I'm like, oh girl, but I love it. I mean, I'm here for.
I'm a cackler. So like we come from a family of cacklers. So like all the men would stay in the other room. So the women would be at the table, just kind of like building and escalating the sound, rattling. Yeah, no. And that's kind of, and sorry. What?
It reminds me of part of the Bible that says, to make a joyful noise unto the Lord. And even though I'm not a believer, I know other believers can kind of connect with that. Like laughter is just a joyful noise. It's not always perfect. It's not always beautiful, but what a fantastic thing to be able to laugh and have some hope and
it's healing. I think it's healing for a nation that we feel some of us feel very wounded, very traumatized, and whatever level that is, whether you're from a marginalized community, whether you're coming off the back end of COVID. There's just been a lot that has gone on in the last 4 years that I think has a lot of people at a lot of unease. And unfortunately, I think just having the two same candidates again, there just wasn't a lot of energy behind that. And now having this shift, I think it's a very positive shift. And I think it's one that a lot of people are kind of really resonating with and really moving toward. I think that's the reason why her support has built so quickly is because we're kind of tired of the crazy a little. Can we tone it down a little bit? Like, whoo, like I need a fire hydrant, or not a fire hydrant, but a fire extinguisher everywhere I go to like cool the temp down. It's been crazy. So I'm so energetic, so excited, not worried. And I got to say, a few weeks ago, I would not have said I wasn't worried for November. And I still had plenty of things that I do worry about, but I feel like we are. I almost feel like we're coasting. Like we just have to let them implode their own party, and we just sit back and go, "They're weird. That was weird. Please stop doing that weird stuff." And that's enough to like set them off. So, oops, right? Oh well. and we're actually coming up right at the hour. But Dennis, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing with us what your intentions are for Oklahoma and really what you want to see happen. Jenni and I, we want more politicians like you. And she had already told me, like, when she told me, hey, I've met a politician, and then she came back and she's like, and now I'm going to go speak. And I was like, okay, well, it's got to be a good one then.
She's not going to go talk for somebody who isn't, or at least they wouldn't ask her to. Like, I mean, she could be like with me out in front of Robinson's office. I try not to get in people's faces quite that much, though. That party likes to get in the face, and I'd rather just come at it from like here's an educational point of view, like here's some facts, maybe pick it up and research. Because like this evening, some of the facts that we read off, I had like resources on LinkedIn for people to go to so they can follow up on it. And that's why I gave them information, the link to your website, Dennis, so that they can follow up and look at your campaign. Jenni, the latest podcast for Dr. Diana is being released. I did put that link on our show tonight. So if y'all are watching, that comes out, tomorrow? Isn't it on the 12th?
I don't know. I already listened to. Are you talking about my interview?
Yes, your interview, I think, actually drops on the 12th on the Paradoxes of Gender podcast. And so y'all will find that link is in tonight's comments.
Apple. So if you have Apple Podcasts,
really?
It's already on there.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Go look for that, guys. But Dennis, thank you so much for coming and joining us this evening. And I wish you the best of luck. You'd have my vote if I was there. I'm not.
I'm not going to make Jenni like tell her vote kind of deal, but you know.
No, enjoyed hearing the North Carolina accent again.
You're welcome. It's pretty thick. We all have our own. Unfortunately, my children don't sound Southern. Like I have a child that actually sounds like she's Midwestern. Like people would say she's from Minnesota, and I'm like, born, raised, North Carolina, always. No, Piedmont. Don't know what to tell you. But yeah, my children just don't have accents. My ex-husband didn't really either. So that kind of stays with me, that Southern twang. So with that being said, well, hey, we all have to have our own little, unique thing, right?
That's right.
So with that, we're going to leave y'all out. Now, I do believe we'll check back. I'm going to put out the event tomorrow for next week, but I do believe we're having Karma back on, right? We think?
I hope so. Okay. She's going to be fresh from a show, so she's going to be fully dolled up. It's going to be super cute. Join us for Karma Eclectic. She is a local Broken Arrow drag queen, and she is magnificent. We love her. And Dennis, thank you again.
A little bit more education there.
Enjoyed the conversation. Learned more.
Awesome. Well, with that, guys, we will see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.